And ESPN1420.com. Welcome back into the Great Scott Show, the Great Sports Callers Open Think Tank. And there's the Scott on with us right now. Former New Orleans Saints linebacker, a Super Bowl champion with the Saints, and now working in the media with CST, Scott Shanle is our guest right now. Scott, how are you this holiday season?
Doing good. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, man, we appreciate you joining us. What's your favorite memory from the Super Bowl season?
There's obviously the favorite memory is being able to finish it off right and beat the Colts and win the Super Bowl. But there's so many, different memories as far as the journey goes, and the group of guys we assembled and the chemistry we automatically had, and starting off the season 13-0, and just knowing throughout some of those early wins in the 2009 season that we had something special going. And but obviously the biggest memory is when that clock struck zero and knowing we were world champions.
Did it sink in right away, or did it take a while?
No, I think when Tracy Porter intercepted that ball, I had a good feeling we were going to be world champions. So I had a little bit of game still to kind of relish in the fact that we were going to be world champions. But as soon as that confetti came down, and to celebrate with the teammates and have your families down on the field, it was one of those nights that you wish could have lasted forever. And I remember not wanting to take my uniform off or going to sleep that night, because I knew as soon as we woke up it was going to be on to the next season, and thinking about the next season already in this business. So for me, I just wanted that night to last forever and drag it out as long as I could.
So what time did you go to bed that night?
Oh, I didn't go to bed. I remember not going to bed. I stayed up. We had our team hotel party and celebrated with teammates and family, and on purpose stayed up throughout that entire night to make it last.
There you go. I finally sleep on the plane ride home. Roman Harper described that team in a piece for Sports Illustrated as sort of the perfect fit for the city, for the state. He also said it was a team that kind of liked to party and enjoy the NOLA nightlife. Is that an accurate description?
Well, I think we got kind of a laugh out of Roman's article when I was down at the game of the Carolina game a couple weeks ago, and I was talking with Jonathan Vilma and some of the other guys, and they said, we don't really remember that team being that big of a partying team. And I said, but you got to remember, Roman at that time, 6 years ago, he was in the younger lifestyle, and that's what he did. So I think regardless of if Roman was in Carolina or New Orleans, he probably would have looked at that time of his life as a little bit more outgoing and party lifestyle. But I think we had a good mixture. We had a lot of young guys like Roman, and obviously the social crowd that he hung out with, they probably did a lot of that. But we also had a lot of older veterans, such as myself, who, we were probably 30, 31, 32, had families, and we enjoyed that. And I think that was what was unique about that team is we had a lot of young guys mixed with older guys who got along and still were able to produce on the field and enjoyed working together.
How many of your former teammates do you still talk to on a regular basis?
Oh, I talk to quite a few, especially defensively. What's fun is we get our mass group text going together, and especially during college football season, talk a lot of trash, but I stay in touch with quite a bit. Will Smith, Bobby McCray, Jonathan Vilma, all the linebackers, right down the list of linebackers. Talk to Jabari Greer, Tracy Porter. A lot, I pretty much talk to almost all the defensive guys still, some of the offensive guys, and keep track of guys on Twitter and see how things are going. But it was such a good group of guys, and I think that's what made it special. Is we were able to win with good guys who really have great relationships, and we didn't have friendships just because we played football, but we had success together, and guys were really down to earth and just really really class group of guys.
Scott Shanle, former Saints linebacker, 10-year NFL vet, Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl 44, our guest right now. You can give him a follow on Twitter at Scott Shanle. You mentioned, I mentioned earlier that you're in the media now, and two-part question, Scott. Are you enjoying your role in the media, and how have your views changed from, about the media from when you were a player and now kind of taking part in it?
Well, I have enjoyed it. To get to be CST giving me the opportunity to be an analyst and to see what the media world is like. I've enjoyed it so much to be there and kind of be the guy where they lean on to say, what happened on this coverage or what happened here? Why did this break down? There's a part of me that enjoys coaching football. I just wasn't ready for that coaching lifestyle as soon as football got over. But for me, the media world is kind of involves the coaching world as well. I get to educate the fans on things that I've learned. So that's really fun to me. I think the biggest thing, as I got older in the NFL, I always respected the job that the media guys had to do. I understand that after a big win or a big loss, I always made myself available, never treated those guys differently because I understand they have a job to do whether it's win or lose. And I have a lot of respect for players who do the same thing and give guys time after games and give them interviews and make that time. I think it says a lot about the players, when you can sit down after a loss and still give an interview to a guy who's doing a job. And for me, I think just being in the media world now, I realize, or I become more appreciative of guys who treat those guys as such.
ESPN1420n.com, The Great Scott Show. Scott Shanle, our guest right now. Let's talk about this year's team then and put on your media cap and your former player cap, your analyst cap. What's the biggest reason in your mind for the 5-8 record right now?
Well, there's just been so much inconsistency. When you look at the turnover, the amount of guys on this team, Jonathan Villman and I joked about it a couple weeks ago. Like I said, we were at the Carolina game, and Jonathan looks at me and goes, I don't know anybody on this team but like 5 guys. And it's been only 2 years since he's been there. So I think when you look at the turnover of this team and the new faces, and not only are they new faces, but they're young faces, there's been a lot of inconsistency. And you get that from young players. But I think the biggest thing for them is the inconsistency with the veteran players. When you look at some of the guys they brought in to be leaders and provide sparks on offense and defense, they haven't done that. And so now that really sets you back. To me, and then, another inconsistency on defense. You went from a different defense coordinator halfway through the season, and for me personally, I think Dennis Allen will be a great defense coordinator. You've already seen the defense last week make tremendous strides in slowing down a Tampa Bay team who was on a roll. And I think Dennis Allen's one of those guys who's a perfectionist. You see guys getting lined up before the play starts. He gets a call in early, so that's been a good change. But when you look at the mental breakdowns on defense early in the season and just giving up big yardage, big plays one after another, the Washington Redskin game, they were the worst offense in the league as far as explosive plays, and I think they had double-digit 12 or 13 plays that game. So I just think consistency and mental toughness, and a lot of that goes to having so many young players, but they need the veterans to step up and show those young players how to be consistent as well.
Well, let's talk about the defensive side of the ball for a moment. And, Brandon Browner has been in the spotlight quite a bit this year, Scott. The game against the Redskins where he sort of gave up on a play to blindside an O-lineman, and obviously the penalties well documented, but those kind of came with him. I think, you mentioned the leadership aspect of it, voted a team captain, and I'm not in that locker room. I know you talk to the players a little bit. The team feels like he gives them something. I mean, he's still on the field, he's still playing, but you see him kind of getting into it with members of the media and with Shannon Sharp and the struggles this year. This just seems to be a bad fit. What's the bigger disappointment for Browner? Is it his play, or is it kind of just, hey, look, we kind of counted on you to be a leader, and when you're giving up on plays to basically take out an O-lineman, that's not what we want from you?
Well, it's definitely both, but if you ask me if I had to choose one or the other, it's definitely his play. I think when you had such an awful defense last year and you're bringing in guys to elevate your defensive play, and you could probably count on one hand big plays he's made in the game, I think that's the bigger disappointment, because in reality, you can handle a guy being a little bit of a jerk post-game, or you can handle a guy being a little bit of a jerk on the sideline. But if he's making interceptions and scoring and making game-changing plays, you put up with it. Now, the problem is when the guy's not making any plays and he's still a jerk, now you've compounded the problem, and you don't want that. But sometimes I think what happens in the NFL in free agency is you get carried away with guys who were on successful teams. And Browner was on the Seahawks team who won a Super Bowl. He was on the Patriots team who won a Super Bowl. And you have to ask yourself, was he responsible, or were the players around him mainly responsible? And a lot of times, and I'm not saying that should always be the case, but what happens sometimes, I guess where I'm leading to with that comment is, teams will bring guys in off Super Bowl teams to be leaders and automatically assume that they're going to be leaders because we're on successful teams. And it doesn't work that way. Guys who don't just become leaders overnight because they have a ring or two. And you have to make sure you know what you're getting in a player personality-wise. And I don't know if that really happened with that signing.
Yeah, it's certainly been a bad combination. And I'm, Scott, I mean, look, you're an analyst. We're not trying to pick on the guy. We're not these Twitter bullies. The bottom line is it's been a bad signing, and if they release him, they got more dead money on the books. It just hadn't worked out. And with a lot of injuries, it's probably been a little harder to bench him. But, you tweeted out a piece about Malcolm Jenkins and some things he said in Philadelphia about accountability there. And he wasn't bashing his own team. He just said, look, it's not something I'm used to, the sort of lack of accountability. It might be, one guy in one meeting sort of just, okay, the DB coach might call out a DB, but it's not sort of a team-wide thing. And he said, it's just something I'm not used to. And, I think you tweeted out a thumbs up or something. But what was the accountability like for your defense during your run, and what's it like, in your opinion, right now with this current group?
Well, I don't think that the accountability is there where it needs to be. Now, I will say this. You can see after 3 weeks with Dennis Allen being on board, I think the accountability is there because I know Dennis is one of those guys. He will get in your face. He doesn't care if you're a veteran. He doesn't care if you're a Pro Bowler. If you're not living up to the standard set, he's going to get in your face. And you saw that a little bit already, and it's paying off. But I will say this. That was one of the biggest things that we had going for us with our success there. And I'll point to the 3-year period from 2009 to 11, and the main reason was because of Greg Williams. He came in our room, in our defensive room, and he didn't care if you were a rookie. He didn't care if you were a 15-year vet who was made multiple Pro Bowls. He didn't care. He was going to talk to you the exact same. He got in everybody's face, and everybody just knew that's how it was going to be because at the end of the day, we're in the business of winning. Greg Williams wanted to win just like all of us wanted to win. And I think as a player, you can respect a guy who treats everybody the same and that nobody was going to get a free pass because of how much money they made or where they were drafted at. And I think that's the number one thing that is the hardest thing for coaches in the NFL is to talk to guys a certain way because of who they are and because of the status they have. And once you start letting that slip, that's when you start to see chaos ensue. So for me, we were kind of all taken back. Heck, we're sitting in the room. I was a 7-year vet. Will Smith was a 6 or 7-year vet, and he talked to us like we were rookies sometimes. But you know what? At the end of the day, we won a lot of games, and so it didn't matter because we knew he was just trying to make us better.
And how big? Scott Shanle, our guest, ESPN1420.com. But how? You just said it. You guys won a lot of games. Is it not easier to do to carry that stick of accountability and swing it when you need to? When you're seeing results on the field, can it kind of start to get away from you when just things are not working out right and maybe you're trying to keep guys accountable, but you're losing? Or is it as simple as, hey, it doesn't matter what your record is, just as long as you got that stick and swing it, the players are going to listen?
Yeah, because, I'll point to this, and I know I just talked about Greg, but look at the St. Louis Rams. Their offense is awful, but their defense, every week you tune in and watch the Rams play on defense, they're flying around, they're hustling. They're not talking back to coach on the sideline. There's not sideline blow-ups. You have to lay the groundwork way back in OTAs, minicamp, and training camp for it to pay off during the season. And so you can't just expect – like I had a lot of people ask me about Dennis Allen's demeanor, and I said it's going to be a great swap for the defense. But you can't expect Dennis to change the groundwork that's been laid over the past 2 years with some of the things they've been doing. So for me, you need to have some time – everybody needs to see it from the get-go of what the standards are, how standards are going to be set, and you have to be accountable. You have to preach what you say. If a player's not living up to the expectations that you've set in your defensive room, he can't play. It doesn't matter. Like I said, Greg said it all the time. I don't care where you were drafted. I don't care what your contract looks like. I'm playing the best people who are going to help us win games. And he would say it all the time. If they don't like the way I do things, I'll be somewhere else coaching, but that's what's right and that's what's fair.
Scott Shanle, our guest. Great insight right here on ESPN 1420 and .com. You give Scott a follow on Twitter at Scott Shanle. Simple as that. On the offensive side of the ball, Scott, and I promise we'll talk about some positives from the team this year too, but it struck me earlier when you mentioned that some of the veterans they brought in and not kind of getting what they wanted. And I brought up Browner, and he's not alone, but certainly he's one that a lot of folks point out, and he was a big signing, as was C.J. Spiller. C.J. got paid a bigger contract than Mark Ingram, and I think a lot of us were excited to see C.J. in this offense. He had the injury early in training camp, and when you see the guy on the practice field, Scott, he's flying around, he's doing this great stuff, and then you don't really see him too much on the game field. Well, for a while, you heard from Sean Payton, we got to find a way to get him in. We got to find a way to get it in, and he didn't get a ton of reps. But once you lose Kyrie Robinson and Mark Ingram and now Marcus Murphy to IR and Tim Hightower, what a great story he is this year, Scott. But whenever you got a guy that, hadn't really played in a couple of years, hadn't been in the league in a couple of years, and he's getting the bulk of the reps, and C.J. Spiller isn't, I hear the reports of, he's just not grasping the playbook. Number one, do you buy that? And I guess secondly, what's been the biggest disappointment about C.J. Spiller this year?
Well, number one, it's just been the opportunities or the playing time he's gotten, and nobody really knows except for C.J. Spiller and the coaching staff why those opportunities aren't there. But I was the same way. I wasn't excited about the Browner signing as far as a fit, and it had nothing to do with his personality or his leadership. I just didn't think he was a fit from a talent standpoint. But C.J. Spiller, I was the exact opposite. I was excited about it because they traded away Darren Sproles. Reggie Bush also was gone, and I thought he could fit that role of being that dynamic acceleration type back in that offense. And you go all the way back to the overtime win over Dallas Cowboys when he took it all the way on the little wheel route down the sideline and won that game. And you thought, wow, this is a sign of things to come this year. And that's really been the only play I can think of, big type of play that he made all year, and a lot of its opportunities. And nobody really knows, except, like I said, those guys, why those opportunities aren't coming. But you would think at this point in the season, especially with all those injuries, that he would have a chance to step on the field more and make some of those plays, especially in this offense. And I think a lot of people around the NFL who follow the NFL thought it would be a great fit as far as with his skill set in this offense coming together.
Yeah, on a positive note, Scott, Drew Brees, your former teammate, continues to play at an elite level. How many more elite years do you think he has left? How many solid, good years do you think Drew has left in the tank?
Well, I tell you what, those years you asked for, in my opinion, they keep growing every time I see him play. Every time I watch him go out there and lead an offense, I think Peyton Manning's kind of the guy you look at, and it seems like with the quarterback position, you can kind of just start to tell. You can start to get a sense of when that time is ending, whether it's arm strength. A lot of it's just arm strength and accuracy, and that happened pretty rapidly for Peyton Manning in Denver. And to me, I don't see those signs with Drew yet. I don't see the lack of zip on the ball or the inaccuracy on timing throws. It's still there. So for me, I think 3 more elite years for sure, and he might be able to play 5 more years in the league.
I'm kind of leaning toward your opinion there. I'm in agreement. 5. I feel it. Look, he's got some really good football left. There's no question. So it kind of boggles my mind when I hear from some of my listeners and folks that follow this team that say, well, you need to get rid of Brees because his contract and blah. I'm thinking, are you crazy? Do you know how hard it is to get an elite quarterback, to get a look? The guy's a first ballot Hall of Famer in the future, and maybe he's not having a year like he had in 2011, but that was one of the greatest statistical years ever. He's still doing amazing things, and I think you got young pieces on defense, Scott, and you might agree with me here. If the Saints defense was kind of middle of the pack in the NFL right now, the Saints are probably a playoff team this year. And so I feel like there's other ways you can try to fix this team come off season time and get better in certain areas. But if you lose number 9, I get, okay, maybe you're trying to rebuild, but there's no guarantee you can ever replace that guy. If you have an all-pro quarterback on your team in this league, that's something that's probably as hard to find and as hard to replace as anything else right now in the league.
There's no question about it, and that's why, to me, you don't ever get rid of a guy like that until you have to. Until either his contract says you have to or his play says you have to. And I don't think the Saints have enough good players on the roster to say, well, so and so can pick up the slack. Our defense will pick up the slack. Drew Brees is the reason you have a chance to win games. Every Sunday when people tune in, it's because number 9's at quarterback, and as long as he's playing at the level he's playing at, you have to keep him around. And you see all the time in the NFL teams overpaying guys. It's unbelievable some of these guys' contracts they get just because they want them to be franchise quarterbacks, and it's almost like we can fool our fan base into believing this is a franchise quarterback if we pay him franchise money. Whether it's, you look at Ryan Tannehill in Miami, he hasn't done anything as far as winning, and yet he's getting paid like these premier quarterbacks. And so once you find that guy, you have to really be cautious of just saying it's time to move on, because those guys are rare, and you see every week in the NFL, every level, you can't win without a quarterback, and it's crazy to think. Someday that day is going to come where Drew Brees is no longer the quarterback, and to me, I don't think it's going to have anything to do with the chunk of salary cap he's getting. I think it's going to have to do with just Father Time catching up to him.
Yeah, I think he'll likely sign some kind of extension. They'll move some money around. I mean, even if the Saints were to cut him, which they're not going to, you're still looking at a $10 million hit in dead money. You've already got more than $12 million with Gillette. You might have more if you kind of send Browner and Spiller packing. And the bottom line is, I mean, those guys aren't Drew Brees. I guess it surprises me, Scott, that the conversation is had as much as it is, because I feel like the conversation doesn't need to be had. I feel like it's pretty cut and dry when it comes to Drew Brees.
Yeah, it is. It is. I think as long as he continues to play the way he is and he's giving you a chance to win, you have to just let it play out.
All right, Scott Shanle, our guest. Just a few more for you, Scott. We appreciate the time. You can give him a follow on Twitter at Scott Shanle. You can check him out as on a CST tonight and a number of just doing some great stuff there and some good stuff on Saturdays this past fall, breaking down some college football as well and breaking down the Saints this season. What, when you hear, I don't even remember who the player was, to be honest with you. I can't recall who it was this past weekend, but I read an article, and the guy was basically telling the media how much pain he was playing through, how he felt like he was, quote, cheating death. And I'm not, look, I'm not a player. You were, okay? I see what you guys do, and I know that I couldn't do it. So I'm not trying to diss him, but my question is, when you have if you have a teammate that kind of goes to the media a lot and always tells them how much he's hurting, do you kind of roll your eyes a little bit, or are some guys just like that?
Well, I think the one thing as a player is some guys take pride in playing through injuries and playing hurt and just having their teammates and coaching staff know about it. And other guys, if they're playing bad enough, I think they want the world to know why they're playing bad.
There you go.
And kind of have a built-in excuse. But the reality of it is everybody in the NFL plays with some type of injury. Now, or I shouldn't say that. Everybody plays hurt. But some guys do try to play through injuries. And injuries are tough because if you're playing with a sprained knee or a hip flexor or the abdominal strains that they have now, those types of things are very hard to play through. And some guys try to muster through and play through those things. But everybody plays hurt. Everybody's nicked up and beat up, and that's the toughest thing about the NFL, especially the older you get. I think for me, once I got to 32 years old, 33, it just takes so long to recover from one Sunday to the next. And that's the biggest issue, is just the recovery, because you go Sunday and then you go in Monday and you run and lift, and then Tuesday you have a day off. And then you start up on Wednesday right away with practices, which are pretty long, and you run a lot. You may not hit a lot, but it gets so tough to recover, and that's where the youth really comes into play, and the recovery time. Those guys just recover so much faster. But yeah, I think some guys just like everybody to kind of, it's almost like a built-in excuse. As Coach Payton would always say, you guys all have a built-in excuse. Everybody's going to be nicked up and hurt. It's just whether or not you can still be productive to the team or not.
So, tonight, St. Louis hosts Tampa Bay, and you just mentioned that turnaround. How difficult is it to play in a Thursday night game, whether it be at home or on the road?
Oh, it's tough. It really is. I kind of lose sight of it sometimes since I've been away from the game, and I just tune in and watch these Thursday night games, and you see a guy miss a tackle or guys not blocking well, and you kind of throw your hands up, and then all I do is I take myself back to that time when you cut the week in half, and now you're warming up, getting ready to play a game. Bumps and bruises are still fresh from last Sunday. You haven't even had more than a couple days of sit in a cold tub or rest your body. Those Thursday night games are tough, and the one thing that makes them even more tough is where you're playing. If you go on the road and play cold Thursday night game in Chicago or New York, that's even tougher on the body. So I have a lot of respect for those guys able to do what they do in a matter of 3 or 4 days, because it's not easy.
So this is a pretty open-ended question. What I kind of set it up with the short turnaround and playing on Thursdays. You've had some experiences with the commissioner, and right now the some call it a crisis, the concussion crisis. What's your take on kind of Commissioner Goodell and the NFL and this perception they try to put out there about player safety? Is it just that? Is it perception? Is it because they know, well, we got all these lawsuits, we have to do something? Or do you think that the guys in New York really genuinely care about the well-being of everybody?
No, I think it's complete perception. I think once they got caught that they had knowledge and information of how damaging concussions were years ago, and they never released it. I think they had to make it look like, they come out with the heads-up football tackling and all these different things, and it all stems from the lawsuit. When you talk about a multi-million-dollar business losing money because parents don't want their kids to play youth football, and they're not tuning in to watch football, that was their biggest fear, is that the game of football wasn't going to generate money. And so for me, it was all perception, because at the end of the day, that's what they care about. They care about making money. There's going to be another player to step in for another player, even if he plays 1 or 2 years. They don't care whether or not a player plays 2 years or 10 years. There's always going to be players to fill in for them. But, I think they've done a good job now of educating people. At least people are educated and can make a choice. For me, it would not have changed if I would have played football or not. I still would have played football because I feel like that was my passion. That's what I love to do. But now you see guys like Chris Borland, the linebacker for the 49ers last year, he retired because he was able to make an educated decision with the information that's out there now. And I think that's where the NFL is definitely liable when you talk about the lawsuit, is guys were not able to make an informed decision based on the information they withheld.
And that's why, they came down so hard on you guys despite, I mean, I don't want to get into all of the Bountygate stuff, Scott, but obviously it was obvious to me at least that they were just trying to put out a perception that, we just care so much about player safety and this is unacceptable, when in reality it was all just a sideshow. It was a circus to try to put out a perception that really wasn't reality.
Yeah, there's no question. The suspensions and the punishments were so harsh because there was a lawsuit over concussions at the time. And if that concussion lawsuit didn't exist, you would have probably saw Coach Payton get suspended a couple games, or some of the players a couple games. There wouldn't have been such ridiculous suspensions, but that's what he did, and that was his way of making it look like he cares about the game. And as time goes on, even right after the bounty stuff came out, and as people find out the facts, I walk around and people find out I played for the Saints, and they say, "So are you part of the bounty stuff?" And I say, "Yeah, I was there." And the first thing a lot of people say to me is, "That was such BS." As that was nothing more than the commissioner trying to make an example out of you guys. So I think, and I live in Dallas, so for Dallas Cowboys fans to say that says a lot. They don't.
There you go.
They kind of side with the Saints, and to me, I think the real shame in it, even if people see that it was BS, the real shame in it is, you had a coach lose an entire year, you had a defense coordinator gone, you have relationships forever fractured. I look at 20 years from now, and we have Super Bowl reunions, there will be relationships fractured based on these allegations and this whole Bountygate scandal that was started by Roger Goodell and the NFL, and this witch hunt that ensued.
Well, we began the conversation talking about the Super Bowl. Nobody can ever take that away from you guys. Just two more questions for you, Scott. We really appreciate the time. Great insight here from Scott Shanle, former Saints linebacker, Super Bowl champion. How many concussions do you think you had in your career, and how many how many were documented?
Well, I only had in college I never had any documented. In the NFL I had 3 documented. Now, just because they were documented, the more I find out about what a concussion actually is, I've probably had hundreds of concussions, because just getting the old ring your bell and kind of hitting somebody and then kind of shaking your head, that at the time was not classified as a concussion. And for me to look back, and I know every player looks back, and we had many concussions, and for me to just have 3 diagnosed doesn't mean that I was lucky. It just means that I had 3 headshots that were fairly significant, more than the other ones. But the more we learn about what a concussion actually is, I definitely had many in practice and the games.
Well, you're in your are you 36 now, Scott?
Yeah.
How are you feeling today?
Head-wise, I feel good. As far as I don't feel any of the things from the concussions. It's more just body aches and pains. I was lucky. I played 10 years, never had a surgery. Only had a small bone broken in my hand. I came away from the game healthy. I don't feel like, I don't limp around. I can still do the things I want to do. Now, 10 years, 20 years from now, it might be different. But for me, I feel like I came away from the game fairly fortunate.
That's good to hear. 3 games left in this season for the Saints, and I understand that they're, mathematically not eliminated yet. But let's just call it what it is. There's 3 games left in this season, and I'd love to see him win out and finish 8-8. And it was my prediction for the team this year. But a lot of fans look at it and say, well, you should rest guys, or you should try to get a draft pick. Within that locker room, they're just saying we just got to win these next 3 games. How much do these next 3 matter in terms of shaping this franchise for next season?
Well, it means a lot, and I know exactly what Coach Payton's telling this team, and the one thing is, the worst record they've had there since he's been there is 7-9, and nobody wants to finish worse than that. And I know they're shooting for 8-8, and it's not something they're going to be proud of, but they can take pride in the way they finish the season and give them hope and give fans hope for the upcoming year. And the big difference, it drives me crazy when people talk about tanking in the NFL for draft picks, because so you move up 3 or 4 spots. If you do your diligence, the only way you're putting together a good team anyway is in rounds 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 anyway. You have to draft well over a course of years to put together a team. One guy 3 or 4 spots higher in the NFL draft usually isn't going to make a difference. And the other thing is, the NBA, it happens all the time. Well, there's a difference. Those guys have guaranteed contracts. They can tank, and they're still going to get their money. Guys in the NFL, they're playing day to day, week to week for a job. And so unless a guy is very confident that he's going to be around next year, I don't really ever see guys tanking in the NFL, because it really is not for long, especially if you play that way and nothing's guaranteed to you.
And, I always laugh at the NBA, too, in terms of tanking, because even if you have the worst record, there's still a 1 in 4 chance you're not getting the top pick. I mean, there's a 70% there's a 20% chance you might not even get a top 3 pick. So there's just no guarantees. You play for your job, you play to win. And here's the last point I'll make, Scott. I tell fans a lot, more than anything, if you establish a culture in a locker room, and this goes for basketball, football, wherever, where losing is acceptable because, you might get a slightly better player in the future, I feel like you've lost the locker room. You can't create a culture where losing for any reason is acceptable, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the one thing that scares coaches to death is the more you lose, the more your players lose, the more your players find ways to rationalize it and to become at ease with it. And that's how you breed a losing culture, is it doesn't sting as much. Or you get guys who start saying, well, it wasn't me, I played well, or it wasn't our position group, we played well. So the more you lose, the more guys rationalize why they're losing, and so it doesn't sting. And that's the number one thing you have to guard against. And you look at the Carolina Panthers, they're the epitome of what confidence can do in anything. It doesn't have to just be sports, but when you win and have as much success as they're having, they're making teams who are just as talented as them or, look average. And they're just playing with such chemistry and togetherness that's what this sport's all about. And that's what makes football special is it takes 22 guys, 11 guys on the field at the same time working together to make any one play work. Great
stuff, great insight, good candid things from a 10-year NFL veteran, a Saints Super Bowl champion, Scott Shanle. Give him a follow on Twitter, @Scott Shanle. Check out his stuff on CST as well. Scott, I appreciate the lengthy amount of time, but I know our listeners are enjoying it, and I'm glad to hear you're feeling pretty good, with the exception of some aches here and there, but for a 10-year vet, and continued success, my friend, and maybe we can do it again in the future.
Absolutely. Appreciate you having me on. Take care.
You got it. That is